AMD's RX 9060 XT 16GB, well, it's definitely a great value graphics card, but is it really good enough to actually use for 1440p gaming, or is it just not fast enough? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. Before that, this video is brought to you by Silkland and their DisplayPort 2.1 certified cables. Look, there's a lot of great monitors on the market, but if you're looking at a brand new 4K 240Hz OLED, well, you'll probably want to opt for one that has a DisplayPort 2.1 connection so that you can send an uncompressed signal for technically the highest possible quality image. And while display stream compression is visually lossless, there are some GPUs that can have bugs, or in the past, I've even seen grayed out features when using compression. This is where Silkland comes in. Making a high quality DisplayPort 2.1 cable isn't easy, and there's not a ton available. Thankfully, Silkland offers VESA certified cables ranging from 1.6 to 6.6 feet using premium high quality components, including 28 gauge tinned copper wiring, 24 karat gold plated connectors, and even subjects their cables to 15,000 plus bending tests. And of course, they're rated for the full 80 gigabit UHBR 20 spec, meaning you're getting the maximum speed possible, and you could even drive 8K at 240 Hz. So if you're thinking of buying a new monitor or just need a new cable and want to get one that'll last, be sure to check out my links in the description below and pick up a Silkland cable today. Alright, so today I'm going to be taking a look at 3 games that I actually play on the ASRock Steel Legend RX 9060 XT 16GB model, which of course definitely go for the 16GB version if you have the choice between that and 8, as it will definitely last a whole lot longer. And just as a quick disclaimer, this was sent to me to do some testing by ASRock, and I will have affiliate links for it in the description below. Thank you to ASRock for making this video possible. But let's first jump into the finals at 1440p epic settings to see how this fares with no settings adjusted. And you can see here that I am already getting around 78 frames per second, but just to let you guys know, I am looking for a locked 144 frames per second as a minimum if I am going to be playing these online games such as the finals, Battlefield 6, as well as Overwatch 2, which are some pretty popular games and ones that I've been enjoying pretty recently. Now, yeah, 80 FPS, it's not unplayable, but I certainly would want more for a more responsive type of situation. So let's jump into the settings and see what we can adjust. All right, so the first thing I'm definitely going to do is enable some sort of an upscaling technique. As 1440p, well, you can upscale a little bit and still have it look pretty decent. And thankfully, they do actually have FSR Quality as an option here. And let's see what it does to our frame rate. Okay, so now we've jumped up to roughly 100 frames per second. It's definitely feeling a whole lot more responsive, and because of that, well, I'm starting to actually play a little better, even though I already got absolutely destroyed, although looks like the game's over already, so we'll have to jump into the next match before we start adjusting some settings, as despite its 16 gigabytes of VRAM, yes, it looks like it can't quite get the frame rate that I'm looking for just yet. So let's move on to the settings next, and there's definitely, right away, I'm gonna go ahead and just take the overall level down to high. I am gonna actually leave the textures at epic, but I am gonna go ahead and reduce the foliage all the way down to low, the reflections to medium, and I'd say the post-processing to medium, the shadows to medium. The view distance I would jump up to epic for competitive reasons, and let's go ahead and see what our frame rate looks like now. Okay, so now we have jumped up to around 125 frames per second. That's not too bad, although I'm still getting absolutely pounded, and it does feel like it's not quite as responsive as I'd like still. So let's adjust a few more settings, see if we can reach that 144 locked. All right, so let's jump back into the video settings, and I think from here, really, the only things we can do is we can reduce the shadows to low, but as you can see, it does make a pretty big impact on the quality, but you might have to make those compromises if you're unwilling to use frame generation. And for a game like this, yeah, I'm probably not gonna enable that unless I absolutely have to. Likewise, let's go to those effects and let's drop those down to low. Let's drop the reflections down to low, global illumination, resolution down to low. Well, post-processing can go to low. Okay, so now we are actually at 144 frames per second, although my frame rate's getting pretty high. So let's go ahead and actually cap the frame rate and see if we finally made it to our desired frame rate. Now, I do think this is perfectly fine, and if I dropped it down to maybe 140, 135, it would feel pretty dang responsive, and I wouldn't have any problems playing the game like that. As you can see, I'm starting to perform better, but let's drop the internal resolution just a little bit more to really lock it in. Okay, so I'm gonna drop it from quality to balanced. I would definitely not go any lower than that, so let's see where it gets us. We're locked roughly at about about 145. Yes, there will be a drop here or there, but overall, yes, it is actually feeling pretty dang good now. And I do feel like I can play this game, although, yeah, because I haven't been the best teammate, we're probably not going to win this game here at this point. I think we can safely say, yes, this game will run at a competitive frame rate without frame generation, making this actually a pretty decent option for budget 1440p gaming for the finals. But let's see how it does in Overwatch 2. And as you can see here at 1440p ultra settings, we are already getting around 140 frame rate, but is it 140 FPS locked or more? And the answer is no. So maybe we can adjust a few settings to make it even better. Let's go over to the settings there and see if we can get that locked in. Let's go over to the video here. Yeah, we're doing 1440p and I'm trying to lock 157 because this game's a little bit easier to run. I have 165 hertz screen and we're not quite there, but we're pretty close. Let's go ahead and use FSR 2 maybe to see if we can make it happen and do some little bit of upscaling here. Let's do 67% for the upscaling and let's see how that looks in game. Okay, so here we are with 67% upscaling, and to be honest with you guys, I don't think this looks too much worse. It's a little bit softer to be sure. It's not quite as nice, but we are now locking 157 frames per second at 1440p ultra. Of course, you could turn down settings instead if you really wanted to, and this is definitely very playable. The performance and latency altogether is very, very good, and I could certainly perform at my best in this game at this locked frame rate, no problem. So I'm definitely giving it the thumbs up for 1440p Overwatch 2 gaming, and in fact, you could probably even do like 4K gaming on the RX 9060 XT 16GB. It's gonna be hard to beat, and I'm so sorry to my teammates, but I'm gonna leave you hanging because we gotta move on to the next game to see how the 9060 XT fares in Battlefield 6. Okay, so here we are in Battlefield 6 at 1440p using the ultra settings, just with motion blur off, and we are getting, it looks like around 70 frames per second if their FPS counter can be believed. But yeah, for this game, I would want to try and get up to that 144 FPS, and I'm also getting a lot of aliasing here, so let's see if we can go ahead and fix that. So let's go into the settings here. Let's go ahead and turn off vertical sync because that's going to make it feel pretty bad. Let's go over here to the advanced settings, and anti-aliasing is just straight up off. That's why it looks pretty horrendous right now, but we're going to use upscaling instead. We're going to upscale from quality using FSR, and let's go ahead and see where things are at. So this actually, I think, looks better than native at this point in some ways. Well, we're getting close to 100 frames per second now. It definitely looks and feels quite a bit better as a whole, but I do feel like, once again, this frame rate is a bit low even for this game. So let's go ahead and jump back into those settings and see what we can do. So let's go over to the graphics quality settings. We're gonna jump the graphics quality to ultra. Now the texture filtering and the quality, we'll keep that at overkill. And now we're seeing actually, yeah, over 100 frames per second at times 120 FPS. But once again, I still want to get a bit more. Let's go more for the medium settings here. So let's go to options, graphics quality settings, and let's do this all the way to medium, and then the textures all the way back up to overkill. And let's see where we're at now. Now we're getting around 125 FPS. It's definitely looking pretty good at this point, and I could definitely play the game in this state. But again, if I'm trying to get 144, I think we're gonna have to actually use upscaling a bit more. So let's go ahead and do that. And instead of FSR Quality, let's go to FSR Balanced. And this is probably the lowest I would go. Once again, we are at around 140 frames per second now. And if I actually go ahead and lock it in, well, we're dropping a bit lower here. So I think we're gonna have to adjust just a few more settings to make this lock 140 FPS. Let's see if we can do it. I think we're gonna actually have to do low settings and then textures and texture filtering to ultra. And let's see where that gets us. Okay, now we are at around 140 FPS. Let's go ahead and lock that in, see what it does. Okay, so 140 FPS frame rate limiter. Let's see where we're at. Well, the game ended, so I guess we'll never know. Let's wait. Okay, so now we have pretty much all those settings except for textures, which are on ultra. We are actually also using FSR on balanced. And overall, you know, look, is it a visual downgrade? Sure, but we are getting pretty much a locked 140 FPS. We finally reached a point where, yeah, I'd play this game. I think it looks pretty decent. And, you know, just to kind of recap here, between the 3 different games that we played the finals, we played Overwatch 2, and then we've played played Battlefield 6, we've been able to get them all to 140 FPS locked or more and still look pretty decent. You know, look, you look at these shadows and yeah, maybe that's not ideal. And so for maybe a lot of people, the 9060 XT, even the 16GB model, depending on the games you're playing, could it be better served at 1080p? Maybe, but with the use of upscaling, I do feel like 1440p is actually a pretty decent use case for this GPU. And for that reason, yes, it did pass being able to run all these games at 1440p at high frame rate settings. So would I recommend this GPU for 1440p gaming? And my answer would be yes, but it does come with some caveats. You are gonna have to reduce settings in some of the more hard to run games, and in some games like the finals in Battlefield 6 that are pretty difficult to run at times, depending on your hardware, you might have to make some significant compromises, which is gonna have a hit to the visual quality, but you are saving a lot of money buying a card like this. So look, I think for a lot of people, that's gonna be totally fine. I think you're gonna really enjoy these games. And for 350 bucks roughly to get a card like this, well, heck, I think that's really hard to beat, and I would definitely recommend picking one up if you're looking for 1440p gaming on a budget. Yep, it can get the job done.
If you made it to the end of the video, be sure to drop a like. Every time you do so, AMD and NVIDIA release new GPUs. Also, if you want to see more, check out one of these related videos. You won't be disappointed.